once again to the Axminster Skills Centre. We're live once again in the routing room. Today we're going to look at, we're going to start a project. A little spice rack, little cabinet that takes on a number of routing tasks. From cutting a profile on the side panel, that's what we're going to look at today. Dovetailing. We're going to make a little letterbox jig. Now this will be next week, so you can make your own jigs to cut in the groove that we've got for the shelf. Then we'll be looking at making the profile inscribed raised panel door. It's a really cool step-by-step project to really get your teeth into. As said, today we're going to be looking at making the sides, and I've drawn out a template. We're going to show you a little hint and tips maybe session on making templates, and then we'll go over to the router table where we'll be using quite a large flush trim cutter, where the bearing is flush trim to the main cutter to actually shape our cabinet sides exactly to our template. But before that, we've got a couple of questions to answer. During my colleague Colwyn's wood turning sessions, we've had a couple of questions that he felt that I might be better suited to answer. So the first question has come from Ethan, and it's what is the best table saw for a beginner in woodworking? Well, Ethan, you need to have a think. Do you need this table saw to be portable? Or have you got a big workshop space where you can go with something maybe bigger or heavier? Certainly. If you come over to the table saw we've got in the corner here, Ben, if you follow me on round just quickly. Okay, that should be fine. So here we have what can be known as a cabinet saw. Generally, cabinet saws are heavier. They've got cast iron tops, which is great for rigidity. They've got induction motors, real good for noise level, and they're service-free motors. So there's no need to go in and check and change brushes after a period of use. But these things are really quite heavy. So if it's going to be in your workshop and pretty much stay in the workshop, we can put it on a wheel kit, but you don't want to be lifting this to be taking it out in the garden to do a job, or put it in the back of the van to go and do a job. There is a really good table saw that's become a little favourite of mine, actually. It was a favourite of mine for some years when I was working back in the shop a few years back. And it's the Bosch. Now, what is the number, Craig? You forget? The GTS 10J. Lovely little, what they call sight saw these days. I know sight saws are slightly different, but it's an aluminium top, but a nice flat aluminium top. It's a brush motor, but being Bosch, it's high quality brush motor. So it's not as noisy as some of those cheapy table saws that really do roar at you and make you jump out of your skin every time you turn them on and really annoy the neighbours. That's probably a consideration as well. This thing's got a lovely rigid fence, 79mm depth of cut, a good ripping width on the fence as well. It goes out to about 45, maybe 49mm if memory serves me. Not too big and bulky to take out and about into the garden if the sun's shining, you want to do your work out there. In the back of the van, I think it's available 110 and 240 volts, so if you're a side guy, great saw for that. But it's a lovely little kind of, what they call contractors kind of side saw. So that was one question from Ethan. I hope that's helped you out. Ben, if we could just back off to the bandsaw a little bit now. We've got a bandsaw related question. Now this has come in from Creative Construction UK. There's a little plug for you there now.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a few messages. Just I need to change the screen orientation. Is that all right if we put them up straight?
Yeah. Just swivel it round. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, folks.
We're using the new device here. How's that? Is that better?
Good.
Looks like I can like that now.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a bandsaw question from Creative Construction. My blade is properly tensioned. Why does it keep coming off the bottom wheel? The most common cause for this is a little bit too much tension, and it's really pulling tight and it pops off that bottom wheel. Yes, your bottom wheel rubbers could be damaged, and it's not quite seating the blade properly, and that's popping off the front. And very, very rarely the wheel, the bottom wheel, which is fixed and in position, factory set, is out of line. But you can eye that. Does it look true to the cabinet? Does it look in line, or is it kicked over? It's really rare. It's really quite unusual, to be honest. So my feeling is it's probably a little bit too much tension. Back the tension off a couple of turns on your tension knob. Retrack and then go again. Good place to check tension is kind of in that area. And you want, with kind of, I know moderate pressures, difficult to gauge, we will push a little bit harder than each other, but about a centimetre of movement, 3/8 of an inch of movement on that blade in that area. Difficult to check tension here because generally your guides are in position and they're designed to restrict blade movement. So it's a difficult one. So yeah, I think it's probably just a little bit over tension there. So hopefully you found those two bits and pieces of information useful. As said, we're going to start today by shaping the sides of our cabinet. All right? We're going to make a template to start with. Now you can see that I've drawn this template out. It follows the shape of the cabinet sides. Okay, here. And this dimension here is really quite specific because that's the piece of material that we're going to be joining into the cabinet sides when we're dovetailing. So that dimension there is equal to that dimension there. But before I get cutting at all, I've spotted that the bandsaw blade I have on my bandsaw, which I'm using at the moment, is the Trade 82552B. You ask any of my colleagues, and I've got probably a healthy liking for this particular bandsaw. It's my go-to machine. I love it. I've got to change the blade. The blade that's on it is really wide, and that'll be okay for the straighter cut. But when I come to cut this curve at the bottom here, it's not going to like it at all. So I'm going to switch the blade. I'm going to do a very quick blade change for you guys. I'm going to talk myself through it bit by bit, but as usual, Ben's behind the counter. Ben's behind the camera. If you've got any questions, please ask. Like I say, I'll do a quick step by step, so just drop in any questions. Hopefully the camera's the right rotation now and you can see me properly. So I'll just pop the fence off out of the way. We don't need that right now. Of course, when we're diving into any blade machine to change the blades, we unplug. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'll talk myself through it. Table insert and table bin pin come off. Drop the majority of the tension off. Take the rest of the tension off there. Open the door wide. Drop that down. It's going to make my life just a little bit easier. And then I can ease the blade out. There we go. Slides through the front. Slides through the sides. And this one, the machine's really quite nice. You've got a slot that's in the side of the table here, not in the front. So you don't have to disturb and take off any of the fence rail to change the blade. It's just a case of take off, rotate, there we go, and then slide through the gap in the table. Alright, fold the blade up nice and safe, pop it on the wall. Now the blade I'm going to be replacing it with is a 1/4 inch blade. Quite narrow, really good for cutting curves. It's considerably different in width, so there's going to be a lot of adjustment to the guides here. They're not going to be in the right position. So what I like to do, to prevent the bearings coming into contact with the teeth, I like to back everything off out of the way. If I'm changing blades like for like, I'll probably leave the guides where they are. If I'm taking a 1/2 inch off and putting a sharper 1/2 inch back on, I'll probably leave that where it is. But because I've gone from kind of 5/8 of an inch down to 1/4 of an inch, there's a radical difference in where the guides need to be. So I'm just backing all those off out of the way. Nice and easy to access, because I do not want these bearings touching the teeth of my blade. Alright, so what I'm doing bandsaw blades, I know a lot of people chuck them across the workshop. Personally, I'm not much of a fan of that, because I don't think it does the blade too much good, to be honest. And Is it the safest thing to do to chuck blades across the workshop? Somebody walks through the door? I don't know. So undoing, it's all about the control. These things, yeah, they want to come undone, but just keep your hands low and just watch where these loops come. And you can see it's almost coming undone by itself. So just one more time. Just watch where those loops are falling. There we go. There. Keep that pinch there and then control. So a nice 1/4 inch wide, 6 TPI blade. It's one of the GT blades, the ground tooth blades, so extra sharp. A lot of blades are milled out, the teeth are milled, so they're sharp, but these are milled and then ground afterwards. Mega sharp blades, so they cut really well. Generally before I put a new blade on, I'll just give the machine a once over, just to make sure there's no debris stuck down in there. The wheels are clean. Maybe these are pretty good. The number one cause of vibration on a bandsaw is muck on the bottom wheel. Right? Even with good extraction, and we're big into good extraction in the skill centre here, you're still going to build up a muck on this bottom wheel here. And then your blade is running on the muck, not necessarily on the wheel itself, on the rubber. So just give that a scrape off. Right, this one's pretty clean anyway. Okay, so new blade on. In the slot all the way up. Doesn't matter whether you hook it over the top wheel first or the bottom wheel, and position it in the middle of the wheel. Now, there's a big debate, I know sometimes, should the teeth be hanging over the edge of the front of the wheel? Should they be in the middle, of the teeth in the middle, and then the body of the blade in the middle? For me, it's the body of the blade in the middle. These particular wheels, and the wheels on most bandsaws, are crowned. They've got like a little crown on the top here. That helps you track the blade to a point, and it also helps the body of the blade is sat on the wheel, and then the teeth are just sat over where the curve drops off. So not too much tooth is actually coming into contact with the rubber, which damages the rubber and can flatten off one side of the set. So modern machines in the middle of the wheel, old machines with flat wheels on the top, this area is flat, maybe they run at the front, but most these days are just like this one. Positioned in the middle of the wheel, Craig. There we go, like that. And we'll add in a little bit of tension. Right, and then we'll crank the rest of the tension on. Alright, I'm checking here all the time. I won't put full tension on yet, so I'm just going to see where that's running. It's nice and quiet, there's no bearings coming into contact yet, no guides, so a little bit more tension. Yeah, that's good. I can see I'm tracking towards the front a little bit, so I'm just going to tweak the tracking knob at the back of the machine, and it's very subtle movements here, really subtle movements on this tracking knob. Fast with this hand, trying to almost replicate the running of the machine to a point. Really little adjustments on the tracking here until you see that blade push back. And what I'm doing now is just pushing the bottom of the wheel out and allowing that to track. And that's it. That is locked. That is tracked and tensioned. Let's bring the guides into position. Right. I'm bringing the side guides forward. And I want to leave the face of the bearing about 2 millimeters away from the gullet line. So when the blade is pushed back a little, the teeth don't go between the bearings. I'll introduce the rear thrust roller, and that needs to be 1 millimeter away from the back of the blade. There we go, the lovely little window. So view is really good here. Okay. There we go, that's locked very nicely. Do the same down below. Now don't forget you've got guides underneath the table on your bandsaw. There we go, 1 millimeter away from the back. Right, and lock everything up. Make sure everything locks securely. Now we need to bring the side guides into position And the side guides want to be just away from the blade. Alright. I'll unlock this. A nice way to do it is some people use a piece of paper or they do it by eye. This is the way that I learned some time ago. So I'll rotate the blade and then I'll roll the bearing until it just kisses the blade and starts moving. Just like that. And then back it off a smidge until it stops. And I'll do that all round, just ensuring that all guides, all side guides, just away from the blade.
So I've got a couple of questions here, Craig.
All far away.
You ready to go?
Yeah.
So first up, when you're unfolding the bandsaw blade, is it any different for a 3/4 inch blade?
Bit more resistance. I'd probably wear gloves, because generally they're coarser blades and they bite a little bit more. Gloves are wise. I've been doing it a long time, and you know I'm really quite used to it. Bit more resistance, but still keep your hands low and you can control it. You really can. Blades on machines of this size, they've not got that much spring in them. Trust me. By all means, if you're really worried about it, then throw them across the workshop technique. But I think that control thing, it works. It's worked for me for years. You know, and I learned that as a 13-year-old butcher's assistant on my Saturday job. Oh, right, so there you go, bringing those guides in. The bottom ones are positioned nicely already. So your machine should be silent. You shouldn't hear any rubbing and whirring, no guides coming into contact. Everything should be just away from the blade. The only thing you really hear maybe is the cleaning brush brushing the wheel. So that is a very quick bandsaw blade change. I've done a really comprehensive video on this. It's about 18, maybe 20 minutes long. So it's available on YouTube, so drop on there. It's a little bit more detail about guide set and squaring and all that sort of stuff. So I'm happy that that blade is running really well. Before I go cutting, I'll just trigger the machine, just make sure everything's safe and running. So we're really quiet. Nothing rubbing, nothing whirring. I'll double check the blade positioning. Yeah, that's really good. So, a very quick blade change. I'm going to be cutting down this line. Now this is a straight, as you can well see. I'm going to use the fence for this bit, and then I'm going to back out the cut, remove the fence, and then pick up the curve. Because I want this to be dead straight, this is a template. I know I'm only making 2 sides to my cabinet, but I might be making 20 sides to a cabinet. I've got a batch of 10 that I've managed to sell maybe to somewhere, and I want to repeat. You've got this template. You can go back to this each and every time and do an identical cut. As said, on a router table with a jig and a cutter, which we'll get to. So first off, I'm going to cut my template nice and precisely. I'm going to introduce the side fence. A bit of weight to this side fence, which is a good thing. Cast iron arm. And this is the piece that is going to form the top of my cabinet. This is the piece that's going to form the top of the cabinet. This is the template we're going to produce. So I'm going to use this piece to set the fence and give me this width. Sliding through, you can just see the blade just kissing this piece of material, knowing that my fence width is set really well. I've got a thin piece of material, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the guide set down. It's about 3/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 inch, 20 mil or so above the workpiece. So the guides are controlling the blade exactly where I want them to, and it's guarding all exposed blades. So it's a really nice, safe operation there. I'm going to flick the extractor on, and I'll do my first cut. I'm using this hand as like a pressure gauge. You want to come in a bit closer?
Yeah, I'll come in a bit here.
Yeah, is that okay? All right. of the pressure gauge just pushing into there. Now ordinarily I'd probably stand on the corner of the table here, kind of a natural position to stand, but to give you a better view, I'm just off a little bit. So that's just cutting down that line beautifully. And just before I get to my curve, I'm going to stop, knowing that I've got a dead straight line. So I can tell you this, there's not too many machines that I would leave and let go mid-cut. That's part of what makes the bandsaw kind of a lot safer than most other cutting tools. What I'm going to do now, excuse me, is just withdraw from the cut. Now this is something you've got to do very carefully, because any snagging and catching potentially can pull that blade off the front of the wheel. So I'm going to just follow exactly the same line, pulling back against the fence. Right. And then we've got a dead straight line right on my line just before my curve starts. Okay? Right. So now I'm going to cut the curve. There we go. So just drop the fence over here. Okay. So now I'm going to cut the curve. Now it's important when you cut the curve to make sure you've got the swing that you need and you're not going to donk into the machine. You might want to mark it from the other side and swing the other way. Well, that's just a consideration, something you need to look at and think about. So very carefully, down the line I've just created, making sure that I don't touch the edge that I want to preserve. And now, go around here and I'll rotate now. Cutting that curve very slowly, very carefully, very gently, almost pivoting on that blade. I want to follow my line. There we are. Alright, is that my right position? Okay. So we've got a lovely straight line following into a flowing curve. Now there's a couple of little lumps and bumps on there, but not very much, but I really want to remove. Turn the extractor off, because you've got to think, we're going to use the bearing guided cutter in a moment, and that bearing guided cutter is going to run against what you've just cut. This is smooth, this is straight. A couple of little lumps and bumps, maybe a little bit of hand movement, so I just want to smooth those out. Whatever you've got on your template will be replicated onto your main workpiece. Alright, so I'm just going to remove those little lumps and bumps with the tiniest little bit of abrasive. Not too much. I don't want to alter the curve there. And that's enough. Smooth, flowing sweep into the straight, giving us a template for our cabinet sides. Okay. Now, we're going to be using this cutter, which is a trimming cutter. It's a bearing guided trimming cutter. So trying to use this cutter to remove all that material in one is a big ask. I know people do it and they just rip the material out, but what worries me is overload on the machine itself, because there's a lot to ask, and just splintering. I'd rather trim off a little bit than rip out a big load of material. So I'm just going to mark up where I've got a tiny little bit to remove. So I'm going to line up my template, which is now ever so slightly, I don't know whether you can see this, ever so slightly smaller than my material. This is the piece I'm going to remove to take down. That's the bit I'm going to trim off, but I need to do the same in this area. So what I've got here to use, I'm making sure that I'm flush here and flush down the spine. I'm going to use a little washer or profile scribe device. Can you see that, Ben?
Yep.
Just like that. And it gives me just that little offset. Okay, oops. Do it on both. Right, line up the top. Line up the spine. There we go.
Can I come in a bit closer and just see that down on the bench?
Yeah. All right. just literally using the width of the washer as a little scriber. It follows the profile, the shape perfectly. I'm going to be back to the bandsaw, and I'm just going to freehand. I'm not going to put the fence on because this bit doesn't matter. As long as we don't go inside that line, this bit doesn't matter. I'm just going to rough this out. Right.
Good.
So you want to follow me back to the bandsaw, mate? Okay. Bit of extraction. So I'm just going to see my line still, and I know I'm on the wrong side. Okay. Go down that line. Then I'll slow down and pivot. Okay, here we go. Just rough that out. It's not smooth, doesn't matter. I can just see my pencil line. And then that just gives me a little bit now to trim off, not a massive big chunk. Position, slowly curve. Rotate. There we go. So what that gives us, as you can see, is a slight offset all around to remove. That's the bit the cutter's going to remove, taking us down to our regular sized, clean, accurate template. So we need both of these pieces over at the router table now, mate. So if you don't mind following me across the workshop, I've already got a cutter over there. Alright, happy?
Yep.
I'll take the cabinet. So, the familiar setup, you've watched these videos before, you've seen me use the router table. Because we're doing a curvy shape, I know it's got a bit of straight, we've removed the straight fence and we're going over to this kind of homemade fence with extraction, a little bit of guarding and a pivot point to start. Now a lot of your router tables that you buy all make an insert like this will have a little area for a pin. Now this replaces the area for the pin. It's just a starting point. I'm going to introduce one of the jigs that we've got on the wall here. Oh, a big one. You can see this. A couple of toggle clamps. A couple of handles. I've even stuck some gripper tape on there to stop the material sliding about. This is what we need to do. We need to go workpiece in and up. Template in and up. Making sure that with the register, the datum point, which is up here, and the back are flush hard against our template, locking in place. That is ready to go. It can be really quick and easy to do this. Now there's a particular way I'm going to put this through. I'm going to flow through this way. I don't want to do that all in reverse completely the other way. And let me explain why. If you try to machine this way with the cutter rotation, we get to this point and we hit end grain. And the cutter rotation can pick up the end grain and really splinter and chip and leave a horrible rough finish here. Really what we're looking for off something like this is almost a finished item with no sanding and stuff. Sanding profiles, as we know, is difficult. So if you, as you can see, if I put that in a slightly different position, okay, as we started, as we're travelling along here with the cutter now, rotation, we'll go what they call downhill. We're not picking up this grain, everything's down away from the grain area, and we're not going to end up with a rough splintering and finishing at this point. So So, that's locked in. Cutter we're using is again a flush trim. It's quite a big one. It's 3/4 of an inch in diameter. The actual cutting length, I've got another one here, just excuse my back for a sec. The actual cutting length is 50 mil. That's quite a lot. The cutter angle itself, it's straight through, although it looks a bit different because we've got an angle on the cutter. This is all straight and flush. So the bearing is exactly the same height here as the cutter. The cutter itself is what they call a shear cut. You can see this cutter here, the one flute, is kicked over at an angle, slicing through gently. Right, it's a much more forgiving, better finished style of cutter. The shear cut, you see it on quite a lot of bits of tool. Cutter height, as always, is important. I want the bearing to be running on my template, the MDF template that we made, with a very, very slight overlap, so the cutter is just above where my template meets my workpiece. Now don't worry, because we're flush here, the cutter won't touch your template, it won't ruin your template, but it will remove that bit of overhang that we created all the way along the cut. Cutter speed, that's something that's really important. Now, it looks like quite a big cutter in that, doesn't it? It's physically large. It's long, it's half-inch shank, it's quite heavy. But because it's a small, relatively small diameter cut, we can run this really fast. Up to, this particular cutter, up to 24,000 RPM. Its cutter diameter, as we've said in previous videos, that denotes how fast you can run that cutter. And all the information is always on the show. It has to be there. Alright? 24,000 RPM. I've checked that. We are there at 24,000. Extraction on. Okay. That's my start point. And I'll give it in halfway through the top. Pause for a moment. Can you see that, Ben? Is that a good?
Yep, maybe a bit higher.
A bit higher. So we can see now, this is flush. Really clean, a planed finish. And that's the amount of material that's removed. So there's no splits, no risk of splits and chipping. Really forgiving on the cutter, the router, and you actually as an operator. You haven't got to force it through because it's trimming. Not a complete severance cut. There's that. Really, really smooth. And now we can just repeat, repeat, repeat. As I said, you might have a dozen of these to do, 20, 30, 40. So it's just a case of the next one goes in, up against the datum, template right way round, up against the datum, locked in. So what we have there are our two cabinet sides. Exactly the same size. We know the width here because we put it through our spiral planer earlier. Really clean, smooth, no sanding needed, no finishing. I'm going to get the abrasive in there to clean off. You notice that I put it through quite swiftly. I knew I had a sharp cutter, I knew I had the speed right. So speed was good. If you go too slow with this because you're worried about this particular area, you can get burning. There's nothing wrong with going fairly swiftly. We'll race it on through, but we're only removing a little bit of material, so that was that was good. So that is the template work. These toggle clamps work really well in a jig like this. They're available in many different sizes. They screw into the template. You can see that we've put them in all sorts of places for different work that we do. They're adjustable here. You can buy big ones, like I say, small ones. These ones are kind of middle size, and they lock down. One thing I'll point out, actually, if you do have an awful lot to do with a cutter like this, it's got a really big height of cut here. This cutter blade is 50 mil. This material is 18 mil. Sorry, no, 16 mil. Right. So if you've made the jig correctly, this one isn't jigged up to do to. If that's on there like that, and your clamps are adjusted, there's nothing stopping you putting two through, halving the time that it takes to do this particular job. Nothing wrong with doubling up, providing everything is set correctly, you've got the power on the machine. That will save you even more time.
Got a quick question from Paul.
Yep.
MDF will wear over time. Is there a harder material that you could use?
Ply's good. Ply's good if you can get that HDF, that green stuff. It's expensive, but if you've got offcuts lying around somewhere, that works well. We make, see, we've got a combination of ply and MDF here. Yeah, ply's good. It depends on how much you're going to use it. If it's a template you're going to use an awful lot, then make it from HDF. I've found that stuff is great, that kind of green MDF type stuff. Ply's good as well, but you find sometimes there's a lot of voids in ply, and it can be a bit difficult to get the smoother kind of finish that you require sometimes. So yeah, MDF's good for short run stuff. Ply, good quality ply, but HDF, that hard green MDF type stuff is ace for this sort of work. We've got two cabinet sides all of a sudden, from square boards, flat boards. We've got two cabinet sides that are starting to look like a cabinet, I think. That really endeth today's session. I'll just talk about what we're going to do week on week. So today really was cabinet sides. Look at templates, look at cutters that work on those templates. Next week we're going to be working on the shelf groove. All right? And we're going to show you how to make your own little letterbox jig. Just with bits of wood and screws and a few bits and bobs and a particular cutter, which is really good for this shallow shelf groove drop in. Look. It's really precise, very simple to do. All right. There we go. Drops in there. So making your own kind of groove jig almost, with a repeat thing. And like I say, you might have a big contract for these and it's repeat. So that's next week. Dovetailing will be the week after, the big one, the dovetailing. So we'll get some jigs out and we'll do some dovetailing. Half blind dovetails these, so they're only visible from the one surface. Half blind. Right. Lapped dovetail, as some people call them. Alright, so after that, let's put that back in. Should have glued something. Oh, can you pass me the cabinet door?
Yeah.
Alright, so cabinet sides, shelf groove, dovetail, and then we will finish up the session. I've got to say, I'm unsure whether to do this into one session or two sessions, because we've got the profile and scribe raised panel door. Alright, and this is really getting the grips with your outer table. Alright, the profile and scribe. And then we'll raise the panel that slots into that. Alright, so that's what we're going to do. That's going to be our plan for the next 4 or 5 weeks. As always, please let's have your questions. If anything you didn't quite get, we need to know. We want to know. If anything else you want to see, we need to talk to you guys and interact and make this happen. Well, we've been live in the Axminster Skills Centre for another Skills Centre at Home video. Please tune in and catch my colleague tomorrow for Colwyn is wood turning. I'm not quite sure exactly what he's doing, but I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good evening. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.